This is Right to Life Radio with John Girardi on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400, a production of Right to Life of Central California. And now, here's your host, John Girardi.
Pro-life groups from all over the state, Pro-Life San Francisco, Kern County Right to Life, us, Right to Life Central California. We had just a whole bunch of people there to protest against the bill. And so that was good. And we went through the halls, meeting with different legislators to urge them to vote no. It was great. Unfortunately, none of the people that we needed to vote no voted no. All the Democrats were basically just in lockstep. They have all, even the relatively moderate chair of the committee, Jose Medina, has seemingly become more and more convinced that this bill is a good idea after last year being very much wishy-washy and almost not voting for it.
I've become more and more convinced that my political survival depends on voting for your bill.
I'm become more and more convinced that it's a lot easier just to play nice with Planned Parenthood and do what they want rather than actually have a conscience. So the bill sort of passed on a party line vote, but I want to talk about the committee testimony. So, because it actually was different. So, usually, at almost every hearing for this bill, and we've had now, I think, this was the 8th hearing on this bill over the last 2 years. So, the bill was introduced last year, passed through the state assembly, passed through the state senate. Governor Brown vetoed it. This year, it was introduced. It's passed through the state senate. This is its second committee hearing in the state assembly.
And John, really this year, unfortunately, it's been on a fast track. I think they saw what happened 2 years ago. They don't want to take any chances with waiting for opposition to mobilize.
Yeah. So they it passed. It's sailing through. So this is sort of the last opportunity. So in certain committees, they allow people to witnesses to testify on behalf of and in opposition to bills. So this is the last opportunity to do that that we've had. Basically, the next committee that it goes to, they don't allow witnesses to testify. It's the Appropriations Committee, so they're just talking about the fiscal impact. And then after that, it goes to the floor of the assembly. So this is the last opportunity that both sides had to actually introduce witnesses to testify for and against the bill. So on the side of those in favor of the bill, they've had the same two witnesses essentially for 2 years testifying. This guy, Dr. Joshua Grossman. And
a more apt name could not be had.
He is indeed a gross man. I actually went to school with a kid named Josh Grossman. I don't think it was the same Josh Grossman.
I hope not.
Just a different Jewish kid. Anyway. Oy vey.
When I was in Israel last week.
When Jonathan was in Israel last week, and met a couple of Joshua Grossmans,
That's right.
I bet. Anyway, so Dr. Joshua Grossman from UCSF and this one girl who was a student at UC Riverside who wanted to get a medication abortion, could not because of difficulties in navigating the healthcare system, and then had a surgical abortion instead.
Oh.
Okay. This time, they had a different pair of witnesses. It was one of Dr. Grossman's research assistants, who's also a doctor at UCSF, and a different girl who had a different sort of non-sob story. Now, we had always not joked, but sort of
Gallows humor,
yeah, literally, that the girl who, the young woman, I should say, who testified who testified in favor of SB 24 and SB 320 last year. Basically, she was a student at UC, was it Irvine or Riverside?
I think UC Berkeley, actually.
She was Berkeley?
I'm pretty sure she was Berkeley.
Not the one, no, not the one today.
No,
I
think one. Even the original one.
The original one? Okay,
yeah.
okay. I thought she was Riverside. Okay, anyway. So the original student who testified, she was this lower income student. She got pregnant. She wanted to get a medication abortion, and she had a very difficult time navigating the healthcare system, and it took her several more weeks than she wanted. And so she ultimately wound up getting a surgical abortion off campus, but it took her a lot of time, and she had to go, okay, blah, blah, blah. And this is not really the most convincing sob story in the world to me. Her problems that she enunciated seem to me like this is just normal adult problems with navigating the healthcare system that are not unique to needing an abortion. It's just That's what happens when you need a healthcare procedure and you're a college student. Sometimes you have to take time. You need to take time to get to a clinic. You need to reschedule things. There are difficulties working with your insurance. Like, this is just normal adult problems. Like, if we're going to cater to you to solve that problem for abortion, then we need to have a hospital literally on campus at every single student center to deal with every medical problem possible, by that same logic that they're using for why there needs to be abortion available on campus.
And John, I think it's really important because I'm aware that these radio shows and podcast episodes may resurface on a Media Matters channel or Right Wing Watch at some point in the future.
Right. Yeah.
So I want to be clear that when we're talking about this, any young person, any young woman who finds herself in an unplanned pregnancy deserves compassion and support and respect.
Right, 100%.
And the sad thing was the reason that I think you and I were making these comments and that we were just so kind of aghast and, I mean, frankly, there's no other word than disgusted. It wasn't that she was pregnant. It wasn't that she was in this difficult situation. It was the really cavalier and casual attitude that the legislature and, frankly, Senator Leyva was really exploiting this girl's difficult life situation and saying, and this is why we need my preferred policy avenue. I mean,
yeah.
It was...
Well, and also, it was also a thing of like, this was presented as like an inconvenience for this girl. It wasn't like her life was falling apart. Yep. She was presenting it as, this is an inconvenience to me. Therefore, everyone.
I had a difficult conversation with my boss at work. I had to ask for time off.
Yeah, well, but that's true if you need a colonoscopy. Like I mean, the idea that this is a problem unique to abortion care.
Yep.
But because these pro-life zealots in the state legislature are just so fixated on abortion as, basically the sacrament of their religion.
Pro-choice zealots.
The pro-choice zealots, sorry. Well, I can call them pro-abortion zealots.
Yeah, you said pro-life.
Oh, did I? Okay, sorry. These pro-choice zealots are just so fixated on abortion that we're going to move heaven and earth and do something that's totally outside the wheelhouse of the CSUs and UC student health centers just because it's abortion. If we were talking about, appendectomy, ruptured appendices, appendices, which I've known several students who needed to have their appendix removed. How dare we allow these kids to wait until they get to an ER or get to the hospital? Like, shouldn't we have on-site appendectomies? Like,
well, and the way that the student was talking about it yesterday, the young woman who was...
So let me clarify. Okay. At Tuesday's hearing, they had a different young woman come in. Different young woman was testifying. She was a student at UC Berkeley. She wanted to get a medication abortion. She found herself pregnant even though she was on an IUD. She wanted to get an abortion, and she wanted to get an abortion because, quote, well, not quote, but the reason why she wanted to get an abortion was because I was planning to go study abroad, and I wanted to get an abortion before I left because I was going to study abroad in a country where abortion is illegal. Now, this is... while I thought the first story was not exactly, it was the most, as I said, the most non-sobby sob story I'd ever heard. This is an even less sobby sob story. Like my affluent, privileged college student plans to go study abroad, which I should kind of not take for granted as this is not something that everyone gets to do. Like, this is actually a really kind of rare opportunity that I should be grateful that I'm going to say that it was just really cavalier and really just kind of jarring.
And this is the sense that I got it, John. If you would have replaced have an abortion with get my passport renewed, the tone and tenor of the testimony would not have changed.
Yeah.
I was really, I realized that I needed to get my passport renewed, and it was only 3 weeks away. And my preferred method was to renew it by mail, and I had to go in to the customs office to do it, which was not my preferred method.
Yeah, it was almost like if someone had advocated, well, we should have passport renewal services on public college campuses, which I honestly would be more reasonable.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
Like that was the sort of tone of it. And it was just it was a complete, a bureaucratic snafu that it's so... I was not able to get my preferred method of abortion.
Yes.
But it was just...
And I joke, John, this was...
I don't know if it was sad or just jarring, or it was
It was less. It was less compassion. I said this to you in the hearing room. It was less compassion than I think people would talk about euthanizing a family pet.
Oh, 100%.
I mean,
100%.
It was that level of callousness, and that's the word that I really feel is that it was callous. It was unfeeling.
Well, and as we wrap up this segment, I think we'll talk about more of this sort of callous attitude. So the doctor who testified had some pretty remarkable things to say about what is actually aborted, and was doing everything in her power not to admit that the thing that is being aborted is a human being. So we're going to talk about that. We'll give you more highlights, or lowlights, I should say, from the committee hearing in opposition to SB 24 from last Tuesday. You're listening to Right to Life Radio on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. The Beach Boys here on Right to Life Radio. This is Don't Worry, Baby. I think we actually just played this like a week ago. I think I might have forgotten about that. Anyway, whatever. It's a great song. I don't apologize. Right to Life Radio here on Power Talk 96.7
Never
and
apologize.
AM 1400. Never apologizing. I have never done anything wrong.
At least for playing the Beach Boys.
At least for playing the Beach Boys. Yeah, as far as that's concerned. Anyway, thank you all so much for tuning in. Right to Life Radio, a production, as always, of Right to Life of Central California, rtlcc.org. We appreciate you, the listener. We got some of our numbers back for both the radio show and the podcast, and numbers are up across the board.
Oh, I didn't realize.
A very significant extent.
Well, that's
so
impressive.
Thank you so much for listening. Please recommend this podcast to a friend if you have any friends. Recommend it to an enemy if you have any enemies. So there you go. Encourage people to download the podcast, to listen live to the radio show. All of our numbers are up. So we're winning so much, you're going to be sick of winning. You're gonna be winning so much it's gonna make your head spin. All right, in the words of our President of the United States. All right, so we're talking about the hearing that we attended earlier this week for SB 24. This is the bill that requires medication abortion to be made available at all public university campuses. Now, there are a couple of aspects to the committee hearing that I thought were really annoying and commentary worthy. Here's one of the things I noted. So Connie Leyva, the senator who's the author of the bill, she gets up and starts by laying out that abortion is a fundamental right, and it's declared to be so by the U.S. Supreme Court. She doesn't lay out that it was only Roe v. Wade that said that abortion was a fundamental right, and actually Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which is the law of the land, which sort of supersedes Roe, said that abortion is only a protected liberty interest, so it's not really a fundamental right anymore. Anyway.
I look forward to the Republicans next session, John, opening a bill by saying the Supreme Court has held repeatedly that personal gun ownership is a fundamental right, and that's why we are opening on-campus gun shops.
On-campus gun shops. Because what good is a right to have an abortion if you can't access it? What good is a right to have a gun if you can't access it?
Do you realize that people may have to drive as many as 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours round trip to exercise their Second Amendment rights?
If you live in San Francisco, where's the nearest shooting range?
And John, it's worse than that. There's a waiting period, a 10-day waiting period. So these students may have to make multiple trips to the gun shop of their choice.
Oh my gosh. This was not my preferred method of gun purchase. Anyway.
That's right.
It's funny how we deal with certain kinds of constitutional rights differently from others. So, for example, constitutional rights that are not actually in the Constitution, like that to abortion, somehow we deal with those differently than the Second Amendment, which is right there. All right. So Leyva starts out her testimony on behalf of her bill by laying out that abortion is a fundamental right. It's a fundamental right. It's protected by the Constitution, and therefore blah, 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 blah. In responding to our witnesses then come up and don't actually say anything about whether abortion is a fundamental right. They don't say anything about whether abortion is moral or immoral. All they do is talk about the problems with medication abortion, the problems with having public universities provide it, the problems that the public universities are going to have to spend taxpayer money and student tuition fees to pay for it, the problem that students who don't believe in abortion are going to have their student tuition fees paying for it, blah, 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 blah. At the end of it, we have two assembly leaders. At the end of it, Assembly Member Shirley Weber, whom I don't like very much, starts saying, people keep making this, a pro-life versus pro-choice thing. People can have their own opinions if they think abortion is right or wrong, but that's not at issue here. If you don't want an abortion, you don't have to have one. Blah, 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 blah. Literally nobody on our side was saying anything about that. Everyone on our side was saying this is bad public policy for the universities. This is beyond the scope of what the universities want to deal with, and here's why. None of us was saying that. So I resent. I love when I talk about things that I resent on this show. I resent. I hate.
I object.
I object. And I thoroughly dislike the attitude that these pro-choice advocates have, that all of us are that none of us know anything about public policy, and all we're doing is just expressing just trying to force our Christian worldview on people. No, we have real, serious, substantive public policy. Not to say that our moral beliefs aren't real, serious, and substantive, because frankly they are, but we have other real, serious, substantive public policy arguments that they don't want to deal with, and they refuse to deal with.
Yep.
They refuse to acknowledge. And it's frankly the reason why the CSUs and UCs still have not endorsed this legislation.
And that's actually, John, something that I was kind of shocked at the question that Stephen Choi asked, because to my knowledge, nobody actually prepped him with this specific question. Mm-hmm. But he did a really good job of pointing out, beyond all the intricacies of the policy disputes that we have, mm-hmm. the concerns about student safety, the concerns about
taxpayer funding, student tuition funding for abortion.
He asked such a basic question. He said, I'm just curious about medical waste.
Yeah.
And he didn't say about the fetal remains. He said medical waste. And he said, who is going to be processing the medical waste from all of these on-campus
abortions,
chemical abortions? And you could hear there was like this, and Connie Leva said,
I am not an expert in this,
the
so
student health centers.
Yeah.
She doesn't even know how a chemical abortion works.
No.
It happens in the dorm room.
And the other amazing thing was the doctor who was testifying was talking about, she was trying to explain about what the medical waste is, and was saying it's basically like a heavy period, and was refusing to acknowledge that actually part of what is involved in that medical waste is the body of a human being. Actually, what's partially involved in that human waste is a very small human being who has arms, legs, fingers, toes, a brain, a heartbeat. This is a human being that we're talking about. This is not. They continue to put forward this unscientific. This is a lump of cells. This is fetal tissue. This is a heavy period. Refusing to actually acknowledge the reality of what they are doing. And it was really kind of sickening. It was a really actually kind of interesting moment. I'm glad Assembly Member Choi, who's the Republican vice chair of the committee, I'm really glad he asked some of those questions, because it really highlights some really important parts to the bill that, again, the sponsors of the bill either haven't thought about or don't care about.
Yeah.
This is what one-party rule looks like, folks. When one side rule, anyway, when the pro-choice side has all the votes, they can do things that are idiotic, and no one calls them out on it. And even if people do call them out, they don't care. All right, we're going to have more thoughts on this hearing, more thoughts on a certain line of argument that I also resent. This is going to be John Girardi's Resentments. You're listening to Right to Life Radio on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. Righteous Brothers. This is the most played song in the history of American radio.
Really?
I heard that somewhere once.
More? Well, I guess.
All right.
See, I was going to say White Christmas is
tone it down for the chorus here.
Okay.
This makes me want to get on an F-14 Tomcat and just join Top Gun and just, oh man. This is the greatest love song ever written. Right to Life Radio here on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. For those of you who don't remember, apparently Jonathan doesn't. This song was a key song in the movie Top Gun.
Yes.
Yes.
Yet another classic movie that I have not seen.
You've never seen Top Gun.
In my defense, I did see Captain Marvel, which does
Oh
also
my
have.
Gosh, get out of here!
It does also have airplane dogfighting scenes.
Oh yeah, because Brie Larson, she's about as charismatic as Tom Cruise.
Yeah. No,
only if you love virtue signaling leftism.
I actually agree with you on this point that Top Gun remains one of the huge gaping holes in my cinematic canon.
Here's what I'm going to suggest. Next time they, 5 minutes from now when they release the next Marvel movie, Guardians of the Avengers, Thor 5, Journey to Milfgard.
Yes.
Milfgard is a realm that Thor has lots of hotter older ladies. We are going to Milfgard.
Okay.
But rather than that, rent Top Gun. Okay.
Well, you know what? If only there was a blockbuster video as featured in the movie Captain Marvel, then I would be able to rent Top Gun.
Well, there you go.
Where am I going to find it? If
there
was some
80,
online service.
It's okay. There are only 80 streaming services you can get it from, or just buy it anyway. Get it off this thing called Amazon.com. All right, Right to Life Radio with John Girardi. The thing I'm going to just talk about superhero movies for 1 second.
A slight digression.
When my wife and I, on our 1 year anniversary, I think, we went somewhere. We were on vacation somewhere. I can't remember where. And we stayed in a hotel. And it was our 1 year anniversary. And we were in bed, we were going to bed, and we had the TV on. And they had the first Superman movie.
Yes.
Or not the first one. Not that one. The first new one. The first Henry Cavill. Man of Steel. Man of Steel. They had Man of Steel on, and they're like, "There's a character named General Zod." This is the dopiest crap I've ever. Oh, it's General Zod! Look out, everyone!
Now to be fair, he is actually a classic character from I think Superman 2 or Superman 3. So
this does not make his name less dweeby.
Yeah.
Look out, everyone! It's General Zod. Oh no, we're having a fight in an IHOP, which clearly paid for ad sponsorship in this movie that we're shoehorning in by having them destroy an IHOP in Kansas or something. Of course. Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Oh no! Look out below! It's General Zod. Okay, Right to Life Radio. Let's talk about abortion. Okay.
Hard pivot.
Hard pivot. So one of the arguments that I heard at the SB 24 hearing on Tuesday, which was, again, a hearing about the SB 24, this is the bill that requires medication abortion on college campuses. One of the things I kept hearing was people saying, well, I know that people on both sides have very strong emotions about this issue of abortion. Both sides feel very strongly. There's a very emotional issue.
Feelings are
both
what count,
sides
John.
have strong feelings about this. Which, first of all, none of our witnesses emoted at all. None of our witnesses in opposition to the bill. The only thing they talked about was, hey, we don't want our student tuition fees to pay for this. This is going to increase student tuition fees, which are already increasing too much. Taxpayers and student tuition fees are going to have to pay for this. You don't have a solid system for funding this program.
Which, as you said, they never addressed.
Which they never addressed because they don't have to, because they had all the votes anyway. It's almost like voting in communist Russia. In communist Russia, issues vote for you. Okay. So basically, this kept being repeated, that this is a very emotional issue. This is a very emotional issue. Both sides have strong passion for these issues, blah, blah. I want to cut through this BS. Abortion, for me, is not an emotional issue.
Yep.
Okay? I've never had an abortion. I know some people who have had abortion, but no one very close to me has had an abortion. It hasn't really touched my life in a way that causes me to emote. Okay? Some people, it has touched their lives. For some people, they do have strong emotions about it. That's fair. But I am equally pro-life to someone who experiences a lot of emotion about it, because I rationally have thoughts and opinions. Not even opinions. I have rational thoughts that I believe to be grounded in reality about, first of all, basic truths of biology, and secondly, certain basic moral principles that I think lead to the conclusion that unborn children have value and should be protected under law from this particular act of violence.
Yep.
Okay? And frankly, even if I had tons of emotional, if I had a really strong personal emotional connection to the topic of abortion, maybe, if I were someone who in a previous life had my wife and I, or my girlfriend and I had an abortion, which is not the case. I've never been personally involved in an abortion. Even if I were involved in some way like that, and I did have a lot of emotion, the core reason why I am pro-life is not the emotion that I experience.
Right.
The key reason I'm pro-life is because of certain rational reasons related to the biological realities about who is and is not a living or human organism, and whether those human organisms have value that needs to be protected under law.
So, John, the way I would say it is, you and I are not emotional in our investment or in our opposition to the Holocaust.
No.
Neither of us participated in the Holocaust.
I don't have any relatives who died in the Holocaust. Yep. It's a history lesson,
yes,
frankly.
I
still think it's bad.
I think
I'm justified in believing that it's morally wrong, even though I don't have a particular emotions about it.
And the idea that you would say, no, you can't have an opinion about the Holocaust unless you were involved somehow.
Well, here's the thing. It's not so much that. It's this idea that this is a problem in ethical theory called emotivism. It's a certain form of relativism. Basically, that it's this notion that there's no actual such thing as moral truths or moral oughts, that all of our opinions or beliefs regarding morality are really just acts of emotion. That when I say abortion is immoral, what I'm really saying on a fundamental level is boo abortion. If I'm saying that abortion is morally okay, I'm really just saying yay abortion. So really, any discourse or discussion about ethics, it's utterly meaningless in a certain way. All you're really doing is saying yay and boo. And there's no action. And so it's a way really of minimizing the moral objections of people who have more traditional. It works well within the context of political liberalism. And I'm using this in terms of classical liberalism, this idea that the idea that there is no such thing as a knowable human good and every person is free to choose the good for themselves. We basically, if we say we don't have a single knowable human nature and a single knowable human good, everyone is free to choose the good for themselves. So if you come off the top rope with your moral objections that certain things are objectively morally right and certain things are objectively morally wrong, and this is based on human nature, I can dismiss all of your opinions by just saying, no, you just feel very strongly about this. And it's a way of minimizing my moral objections to abortion by relegating it to the realm of emotional, grunting, more or less. And that's not what I am saying. I have a rational, and frankly, not just I, but everyone on my side has rational, reasonable objections to this moral practice of abortion. So if you hear someone say that to you, dear listener, that, I know everyone feels strongly about this, shoot back and say, no. I don't feel strongly about this. I think strongly about this.
Yep.
I have a principled, moral, ethical belief, but it's a belief that's grounded in certain realities and facts. Ethics is not a purely relativistic enterprise where it's just the result of how you feel about stuff. Okay? Ethics is a real study. It's a real, realm of knowledge. And there are certain, most human beings on this earth are not purely relativistic.
Yep.
If you really drill down, they really believe that certain things are objectively true and false. And certainly when it comes to things like human rights or things like that, people, if you really drill down into them, they can accept most of the premises of the pro-life argument. Science tells us that the unborn child is a living, unique human organism from the moment of conception. There is a pretty simple ethical argument to be made that all human beings deserve protection under law, and you simply need to extend that to unborn children, and that the right of an unborn human being to live has to outweigh the burdens that are imposed on a mother, given the nature of the good that we're protecting in these two cases. One is autonomy and ease for social conditions and things like that. The other is life and death. So I resent, this is a show about my resentments, apparently. I resent when these pro-choice politicians say things like, well, I know everyone has very strong feelings about this. And I don't like it when conservatives and pro-lifers say, everyone feels very strongly about this issue. No, I don't feel very strongly about this issue, although the more I talk about this, I feel strongly about being relegated to the realm of a grunting, purely emotive, sub-rational creature. That's what ticks me off. My objection to abortion is based in reason, logic, and certain biological and ethical truths. All right. We'll be right back for our closing segment here on Right to Life Radio on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. This is Bob Dylan on Right to Life Radio. Medicine, pavement, government, trench coat, paid off. I don't actually know all the lyrics to this song. All right, Right to Life Radio. That's Subterranean Homesick Blues by Mr. Bob Dylan.
That is a song title right there.
Yes, indeed. Thank you all so much. Nobel Prize laureate Bob Dylan. It's a stretch. He wrote some good pop songs. Let's not get bent. That's like the ultimate act of a baby boomer cultural patting themselves on the back, was giving Bob Dylan a Nobel Prize.
Hey,
like, come on, like,
John.
This is another rant. All right, well, while we're just on the subject, this is another John Girardi rant. People refuse to distinguish in America between high culture and pop culture, and it results in people saying that Bob Dylan is a genius. Like, Mozart was a genius. Okay, let's like, John, pump the brakes a bit. Bob Dylan wrote a lot of nice folk and country and pop songs. Like, let's not act like he's, curing cancer here, people.
John.
Anyway, Right to Life Radio with John Girardi.
If Bob Dylan gets the Nobel Prize, though, then all of those concerts you went to in the 60s and 70s become important cultural touchstones.
Exactly.
And not times you just got stoned in the audience with your friends.
Exactly. See, that's the heart of it. Thank you, Jonathan, for cutting through it.
Post hoc justification.
Yes.
Of a lot of doobie smoking.
So, take that, Mom and Dad. I told you Bob Dylan was cool.
Right to Life Radio with John Girardi. Thank you all so much. I'm really looking forward to 20 years from now when Snoop Dogg gets a Nobel Prize for
Oh, you didn't hear this?
Gin and juice.
You didn't hear that Snoop Dogg just won at the BET Awards Best Gospel Album.
He released a gospel album?
I am not kidding. That is an actual thing that happened in 2019.
No one's ever modeled Christian discipleship quite like a guy who.
At least he made a payroll.
Quite like a guy who said, I got bleep in the living room getting it on, and they ain't leaving till 6 a.m.
Yep.
We don't love them bleeps. Anyway, Right to Life Radio with John Girardi, giving you censored versions of Snoop Dogg songs. Looking forward to Snoop Dogg becoming a Nobel Prize laureate.
And John, I want to make sure we don't forget this, that I made a very good joke during the break. So,
oh yes.
John's autobiography, unlike Scalia, his Justice Antonin Scalia.
Was it a biography or an autobiography?
I think it was a
biography.
I think it was a biography of him. It was talking about his many opinions he wrote, where he often, when he was not in the majority, he would have these scathing opinions correcting what he saw from the majority. Yeah. And the title of the book was
Majority.
I Dissent.
Yeah, so my biography is going to be called I Resent.
That's right.
Because it's a thing I love saying on the radio, especially. I resent this notion. Anyway.
And also, you can just change it. Instead of respectfully I dissent, it can be disrespectfully I resent.
See, that's the thing I hate. So the whole last segment was me pushing back against this argument, which we hear all the time, that abortion's a very emotional issue. And people have very strong feelings about it. And, people feel one way or another. I don't feel about it. Like, I have some feelings about it, but my core, at least, I've never had an abortion. I don't know anyone who had an abortion. I've never paid for an abortion. I've never been involved in abortion. I'm not, I don't have personal feelings about the topic. I have moral beliefs and principles that and that are based in certain biological realities and ethical truths. It's not a question of feelings. And so by saying that you feel really strongly about this question, you basically take the question out of the realm of rational thought. And actually, this touches on another issue. We'll close out the show talking about this. When physician-assisted suicide was being debated in California, and when it was passed in 2015, I really kind of disliked... There was a part of me that sort of disliked the way in which the Republicans and the opponents of assisted suicide, because it was a lot of Democrats too, I disliked the ways in which the opponents of physician-assisted suicide legalization argued against it on the floor of the state assembly. They basically what happened was one side would offer... Basically, what happened was everyone on the conservative side would talk about, my Aunt Millie was diagnosed with cancer. She was given, 6 months to live. 15 years later, she's still alive. I'm so grateful for Aunt Millie. Therefore, we shouldn't have legalized physician-assisted suicide. And that's an argument. But the problem was, it was based in a lot of feelings and emotions about how much I love my Aunt Millie.
Yep.
And the core contention of the pro-assisted suicide argument is something that needs to be countered. The core contention of the pro-assisted suicide argument was, we believe in a certain conception of liberty and a certain conception of freedom, that anything you do within the perimeter of your swinging arms, whatever you want to do to harm yourself, whatever, as long as you're not involving someone who doesn't want to consent to whatever it is you're doing, it's fine. Therefore, if you want to ask a doctor to help you and your life, that's up to you. You are free to do that. You are choosing the good for yourself. We live in a liberal democracy where we respect that freedom that you have. So, therefore, do it. We need a better objection than, well, my Aunt Libby, made the wrong decision. If she had chosen assisted suicide, that would have been the wrong decision because she lived so much longer. And here's my emotional argument for why. If the only thing you're coming back with are emotional arguments to that core contention of liberalism, that core contention about freedom, which I think is fundamentally wrong, okay? What I'm saying is that I reject this core contention that you are free to do whatever you want as long as you don't hurt other people. No, there are certain things that you can do to yourself that are objectively morally wrong, that run contrary to the very nature of what it is to be human, that are objectively wrong and hurtful and bad for you, and one of those things is killing yourself. It's not just the consequences of killing yourself that are bad. The inherent nature of what it is bad, and the philosophy underlying it is bad.
John, are you saying that our political and public policy debates should be centered on facts and not feelings?
Yeah. Well, no. Come on. Are you saying that the facts don't care about your feelings?
It seems crazy to me.
He signed a really lucrative radio contract, that guy. Anyway, without mentioning radio hosts from other stations, thank you all so much for tuning in to Right to Life Radio. We will see you next week. Arrivederci.